This is the To Health With That, Naturally Healthy in No Time podcast for big health topics taken in small bites. I'm your host, naturopathic Dr. Amy Newsel, and this is Season 1, all about the MTHFR mutation. This week, let's talk about the relationship between MTHFR and dopamine. So we're in the middle of kind of a little mini-series on MTHFR and its relationship with different neurotransmitters, because there are several that can be affected directly via the BH4 pathway. MTHFR obviously can come with a host of mental health issues, including depression, anxiety, obsessive-compulsive traits, and broader issues like bipolar disorder or schizophrenia. And culturally, we tend to jump to the idea that any mental health issue is a neurotransmitter problem, and that the only way we might solve them is by boosting neurochemistry. Last week, we talked about serotonin, but today we're going to talk about dopamine. I don't tend to believe in the neurotransmitter theory of depression. Not that they don't contribute, of course they do, but it's not the first thing that I think of when I see a more global mental health issue like depression or anxiety. With MTHFR especially, it's incredibly important to look first to your methylation and work on balancing that. Because balancing your methylation by itself, right, increasing your levels of functional folate and working on actually getting that cycle going the way it's supposed to go, will produce tremendous changes in your mental health. So dopamine release is pleasurable, and it's associated with feelings of reward. So dopamine is very, very tied into learning and motivation. The more dopamine some activity causes to be released, the more motivated you actually are to do that activity again. Likewise, if you do an activity and not much dopamine is released, then you lack the happy reward feelings and you're not very motivated to do more of it. Dopamine's also involved in the regulation of body movements, and very low dopamine is linked to both Parkinson's disease and schizophrenia. While low dopamine can express as mental health issues, the first signs might not actually be related to mental health at all. Also, symptoms of low dopamine can be an issue with the actual level of dopamine, but more commonly, it's an issue with the levels of dopamine receptors, which are highly susceptible to fluctuation. Symptoms can include persistent constipation, not where you thought I was going with that. Dopamine in the spinal nerves is actually linked to healthy movement of the GI tract. Also, low enjoyment, that's probably a little closer to the expected. Because dopamine produces these happy feelings of reward, low dopamine can make you stop enjoying the things that used to make you happy. Tremors, shaking hands, restless legs, or muscle twitches. So dopamine's involvement in regulating muscle function means that low dopamine can affect these systems first. Likewise, difficulty swallowing or the aspiration of food, because the muscles that control swallowing are also regulated by dopamine and are very small muscles with major sort of life-saving functions. Decreased sex drive. So just like dopamine is involved in reward with other activities, it's involved with the feelings of reward that we get from sex as well. Addictions, unfortunately, for some people a low sense of reward can lead to addictive tendencies, especially with drugs powerful enough to trigger that reward sensation again. So essentially seeking that reward sensation if you're not finding it in the rest of your life. Fatigue and lack of wakefulness. So dopamine is, strangely, one of the reasons that you feel refreshed and alert most mornings. Low dopamine, or, interestingly, low dopamine receptors can leave you feeling groggy, fuzzy, or sleepy. Weight gain, especially after prolonged periods of high dopamine stimulation, like the weight gain that follows smoking cessation. So the cigarettes were triggering your happy dopamine feelings. When you stop the cigarettes, there's none of those happy dopamine feelings, so you switch to overfeeding, basically, and overeating to try and chase down those happy dopamine feelings. ADHD. Research is beginning to emerge showing a link between low dopamine states, genetic polymorphisms relating to dopamine receptors, and ADHD. Also to more major conditions like major depressive disorder, schizophrenia, and Parkinson's disease. So obviously, dopamine is vital. The biggest and most important steps for MTHFR folks, again, is balancing your methylation. That means following the To Health With That plan, eliminating your folic acid, getting a background of good B vitamins without any folate or B12, and then slowly adding in methylfolate and a good form of B12, one at a time. All of this while using your symptom tracker. If the plan is new to you, there's a great Start Here resource up on the website, tohealthwiththat.com. Or, if you join the community, the MTHFR community, Genetic Rockstars, that resource is also available as part of your welcome package. So go to community.tohealthwiththat.com and join up. Once you've got your methylation where you want it to be, it's time maybe to think about addressing dopamine specifically if you've got some dopamine symptoms. Here are some things you can try. So as with serotonin, exercise, running, dancing, or otherwise working up a sweat can push dopamine levels in certain parts of the brain, leading to the characteristic runner's high. Even if you're not getting the feeling of runner's high, dopamine levels are still being elevated. Sleep. So everything in life, right, comes down to sleep. Sleep deprivation has been shown to reduce the number of dopamine D2 receptors in the brain, and restoring healthy sleep can replenish those numbers. Losing weight. Research shows that obesity also reduces the number of D2 receptors relative to normal weight individuals. Losing weight can help to boost those receptors again. Listening to music, seeing beautiful art, singing, or playing. So, while the survival benefit to feelings of reward from food or sex is pretty clear, this is a bit more mysterious. Uplifting or beautiful music, enjoying beautiful art, singing, or even playing, right? Engaging in play stimulate the same feelings of reward via dopamine and can be used to bolster flagging dopamine levels. So get out there and blow some bubbles, kids. Also, you can eat your dopamine, not just precursors, but actual dopamine in foods. Bananas, avocados, and plantains are very good dietary sources, and banana peel, so the yellow part, not the inside flesh that we normally eat, is almost 100 times richer a source than the pulp, the white part. So maybe it's time to make some organic whole banana smoothies, peel and all. Eating a good food source of tyrosine, which is the precursor to dopamine, can be helpful. That includes chicken, almonds, peanuts, soy, and dairy products. Now, like everything else about health, reducing your stress levels helps your dopamine. Chronic exposure to stressors lowers your neurotransmitters globally, including dopamine. So learning how to reduce or manage your stress can change those levels for the better. Eat less saturated fat. Interestingly, saturated fats like those in butter, animal fat, coconut oil, and palm oil can disrupt dopamine levels when eaten at too high an amount. Research shows that changes in dopamine levels happen even without changes to weight, hormones, blood sugars, or body fats. And meditate. One study showed a 64% increase in dopamine response after an hour of meditating versus an hour of sitting quietly. 64% is a whopping increase, and although an hour of meditation might not fit into everyone's daily routine, I'm guessing you could find 15 minutes. And, just like serotonin, sunlight or a light therapy box. Dopamine D2 and D3 receptor levels are much higher in people with higher sunlight exposure than they are in people with low sunlight exposure. Getting more light can boost your receptor profile. Now, there's also a couple of supplements. Mucuna pruriens. So it's otherwise known as velvet beans, and they have a high level of L-Dopa, which is the most immediate precursor to dopamine. Studies on mucuna for Parkinson's disease show that the benefits of mucuna might be both stronger and longer lasting than those of the traditional medicines for Parkinson's disease. Velvet beans, however, are toxic in high amounts, so always work with a practitioner to find a good dose for you. Just FYI, the dose that they used in the study was 250 grams of food, right? Mucunapurines as a food. Tyrosine supplements as well, especially when taken away from food, can give your body a good supply of precursors to feed that dopamine pathway. Neurotransmitter balance, including your dopamine levels, depends strongly on your methylation for MTHFR folks specifically, and balancing methylation is just the foundational step. Once you've laid the foundation, addressing receptor function should actually ideally be your next priority. Lifestyle changes that boost your receptors, like getting good sunlight, meditating, and making dietary changes, will be far better in the long run than taking supplements unless you're in an extremely low dopamine situation like Parkinson's or schizophrenia. Thanks so much for listening today, and I do hope you'll join me in the MTHFR community, Genetic Rockstars, because it's hilarious. It's been a tremendous group of people with some incredible stories and great questions, and we're having these incredible discussions, so I am super excited about it. Thanks for listening.